Thank you for joining us today. Password managers are cloud-based tools that can be installed on mobile devices in the forms of apps or on desktops and laptop computers in the forms of browser extensions and add-ons. They require creating an account, and some of them charge a monthly or annual fee. In today's class, we're going to learn about the different features offered in these and why you might consider using them, as well as doing a demonstration of setting up and working with a password manager. The first question is, why would you use a password manager? The problem we're trying to solve is losing passwords and/or not being able to reach them when away from home or away from wherever you store the information. As someone who works with the public and has helped them with computer problems for many years now, I have more times than I can count gone to help somebody with an issue they're having and then had them tell me, oh, I don't know the password to that, or I have it written down at home, and that slows everything down and creates an extra bit of hassle for them. So password managers can help minimize this issue. Now, there are pros and cons of working with them, and I have a few of them laid out here, as you can see on the screen. For the pros, obviously fewer lost passwords. The whole idea of this is that it would store passwords that you use in your device or on the browser of your computer. We'll get into the details of how that works in just a few minutes. So you're going to have fewer issues where you need to go to the lost my password procedure and have it retrieve your password information and bring that back. This requires less signing out of other devices and updating your records and all the things that go with the frustrations of losing a password. Another pro is that it encourages more secure passwords. If you don't have to memorize them, if it's going to be remembered automatically, you don't always use the same password over and over again, or you don't use some very basic ones that you're comfortable with. This can make things more secure for you and help you avoid online loss or theft in the future. Another pro is less memorization. You might be saying, well, I'm pretty good at remembering my passwords. I can keep track of all of these things. That's not necessarily how you want your energy to be spent. Memorizing passwords and keeping track of all of these options that we have, whether it's usernames, passwords, credit card numbers, all the things that we use when working with our devices, can be a bit of an energy and a time drain, and we want to reduce that whenever possible. Another thing that I mentioned here in the pros is that browser-based password managers are limited. Google, Apple, Windows, they all offer browser-based retention of passwords for these things, but they all have limited features. They don't connect very well with mobile devices. They don't always sync up very smoothly, and the security can be somewhat questionable. I do want to note here that Apple Keychain is something of an exception to this, as that it works very well, but only if you are dedicated to using only Apple devices. So if you have an iPhone that you have Apple Keychain on, but then you also have a Windows laptop, you might run into issues with that. So there are browser-based options that you can use. They generally don't perform as well, or they require you to be very dedicated to using the same devices at all times. Finally, the password managers often offer additional features. We'll look at these when we talk about a specific demo later on, but some examples could be two-factor authentication devices. They might have authenticator apps built in with them. Some of them offer secure message transfer or file transfer. So they can go a little bit above and beyond simply retaining your passwords and bringing them with you. Now, as for the cons, there is often a cost associated with this. We will do a demonstration of a free product, and there are other free products out there, but the cost for some of them can be worth noting. Typically, it's in the $10 to $50 a year range, so it's not extremely expensive, but it's not necessarily trivial. So you're often looking at $3 to $5 a month, depending on what product you go with. There are some security concerns. Different password managers have different levels of security involved with them. Some of them require two-factor authentication, some of them do not. Some of them have more stringent password requirements, some of them do not. And if you're putting all of your personal information with this one resource, then you want to make sure it's as secure as possible. For that reason, I'll recommend some higher password security and some other features when we get to that demo later on. Finally, there are additional apps or add-ons required for using any of these services. So if you are using this on a mobile phone, you're going to have to install the app associated with it. If you are using it on your browser, you're going to have to add the extension or add-on, depending on which browser you like to use, and that is a little bit of a slowdown on your device. I have not found it to be noticeable on any phone or computer that I've used when working with these products, but it does use some of the device's energy, and so that is going to slow things down a little bit. Now, I want to go over some of the popular products here. There are a lot of products out there. You can read a number of reviews on websites such as CNET or Wired to get a feel for what are currently the most popular or the best reviewed options that are available. I chose 3 of them here just for demonstration purpose. I'll focus on 2 of them in particular, but I did mention one for those that have more security concerns. You see there at the bottom, Dashlane. They were generally rated the highest for secure transfer of information. But the 2 that I want to mention here in more detail are 1Password and Bitwarden. These 2 appeared on just about every top 10 or top 20 list that I was able to find, and for good reason. They offer a lot of features. The prices are reasonable, or in the case of Bitwarden, free, unless you want to go with the premium option. And they're relatively easy to use. When we do the demo in just a moment, I'm going to be talking about Bitwarden because I want to do a demonstration with something free that everybody can try out. Though I should note that 1Password has a free trial as well. It's recently been changed from 1 month to 2 weeks. But if you want to try that one out, you have that option to do so for free. Now, some of the things worth noting about 1Password is that it does offer considerable extras above and beyond just the basic password management. So more or less everything that we see when we do the demo in Bitwarden, you're going to have available to you when working with 1Password. But some of the other extras that they offer are alerts when passwords are weak or have been found online. There are some services that you can use online to search for your usernames, passwords, email address, etc., to see if any of your information has been stolen and is appearing anywhere on the dark web or any place where people traffic in this information. And 1Password will automatically search for your passwords that you have recorded with it to see if any of that is coming up anywhere out there. So that can be a very nice feature. It also provides a travel mode, allowing you to temporarily remove all private information from the device. You might be wondering why you would want to do this. At a number of countries, if you travel internationally, there are increasing concerns that people will stop you and inspect your devices at the border. And very often people have had information stolen with that or are concerned about the risks to their information when security are allowed to inspect their devices. So this way you could make it so that you temporarily do not have any of your passwords on this, so you would not be putting, say, your banking or any personal private information at risk when you are traveling to and from. And then you could turn that off when you were so inclined and then be able to access your information again. Because the information would not be stored on your device, it would be stored in a cloud location that was safely remote from your phone. Finally, 1Password works as an authentication app when required for 2-factor products. There are free authentication apps out there. I personally use the Google authentication tool for a number of different services that we'll go into more detail later on about how those work. But if you wanted to have one and you have not used one yet, 1Password does provide that for you. So it can not only be used as an authentication for things that you're doing with the device, but it could be used for other websites that require you to have a 2-factor authentication device separate from your password login. Finally, I do mention that 1Password charges $3 a month, which is not nothing, but it is not too high of an expense. So that's something worth considering. Now, talking about Bitwarden, which is what we're going to do our demo on in just a moment, a few features about that. For one, it is free, but they do have a $10 per year premium version available. That offers you some extra features, and it does also get you better support available to you. So if you wanted to access technical support, or if the basic features provided weren't enough for what you're looking to do, then you might want to consider that option. $10 a year is a relatively low price. Another thing worth noting about Bitwarden is that it is open sourced. That means that it is currently essentially in collective development, and people can see what is being worked on, how it works in the background, what's going on with their information. So very good transparency from Bitwarden there. One related thing to that, there's a lot of very active discussion boards online with Bitwarden, and people will suggest new features or things that they would like to see changed. I'll mention one of these in passing when we were going through some of the features later on, that when I was looking up how to do it, because it seemed like an obvious thing that should be available, I found immediately several places online in the discussion boards where people were saying, hey, Bitwarden, you need to add this feature. So you can expect this to continue developing over time and to have more features updated and changed as things go on. You might be concerned if you hear that this is open source and in the process of developing. Is this secure enough for my data yet? And I can tell you that in 2020, so over 2 years ago now, it was audited for security and found to pass without any issues. So not too many concerns for that. And it also does provide support for biometric products. So that's fingerprints, Face ID. You will use these on phones very often. Most modern cell phones offer either fingerprint or Face ID or both. But you can also get products that do this on desktop computers, such as Windows Hello or Touch ID for Windows and Macs, respectively. So a lot of options available there, a lot of things worth considering. Now, I do want to talk briefly about alternative solutions. If you listened to this video and you decided, I don't really want to add the extra app in, or I'm not comfortable with the idea of everything being in a password manager, but I am having trouble remembering my passwords, what else is out there? What else can I do? And just some alternatives that I wanted to mention here. In addition to, we mentioned earlier that the browsers have file retention and password retention options built into them, whether you use the Google password retention or Apple's keychain. There are some simpler options that you have available as well. For example, cloud storage. If you use iCloud, Google Docs, or any variations of that, you can keep a document stored there where you would keep a list of your passwords. It's a relatively simple idea, essentially creating a Rolodex that you access online. Now, the downside of this is, of course, if you have any security concerns with either your iCloud or your Google Docs, then that would be accessible there and you would be putting that at risk. So you would want to make sure, however those devices are accessed, you would have two-factor authentication and have that as secure as possible to reduce any risk there. Similar to this, we have the idea of a locally stored file. So you can have a document or a note on a computer or a mobile device where you have these things stored. The downside there is that a locally stored file does not transfer from one device to the other. So if you had this stored on your computer and then you are on your cell phone or you're out of the house and you need to access this, say, through a public computer somewhere, you would not be able to because it's stored on your computer at home. The other downside of this is, of course, that you'd have the same security concerns that you would have with the cloud storage. They would just be specific to whichever device that document or note was stored on. So you'd want to be careful there. It also would not do some convenient things like auto-populating the passwords into your websites when you're going to use them. You would have to go back and forth in either of these options. You'd have to go back and forth between the, say, the iCloud or Google Doc or the file that's stored locally on the computer to look it up. Not the biggest deal, but extra work involved, certainly. Finally, I do mention physical storage, the idea of having, say, a paper Rolodex sitting on your desk. Now, this is not something that you would want to do if you were working in a public area. The classic joke of the password taped to the monitor at somebody's desk is not something that you ever want to do. That is, of course, a big security concern. But if this is your home and you don't have any people that are accessing your computer area that you would be worried about stealing your information, it's not necessarily a bad idea to have a pencil and paper version of your passwords stored somewhere, just in case something goes wrong, whether it's with your password manager or with any other means you have for recording these. Certainly the password that you use for creating your password manager account, as we're going to talk about in just a moment, you would want to have written down or stored in some place separate from the password manager itself, because if you lose access to that, then you lose everything there. So in a secure place at home where you're not likely to lose it, having some passwords written down, not necessarily a bad idea. I have had a physical Rolodex on my desk at home with passwords for many, many years now, and it's not something that I update or that I use as frequently as the ones that I have online, but it is something that I use for keeping key passwords that I don't want to lose and that I don't want to store casually anywhere. So, worth mentioning there. We already talked about the concerns of security and accessibility that come with these, but there are some pluses as well. Now, let's get to our demo. As we begin this demo, I want to go over a few points. First off, I selected Bitwarden as a free option for demonstration purposes. I'd remind you that neither I nor the Bloomingdale Public Library are endorsing any particular product or suggesting that you should use any one or other of these options that are available. We're just highlighting different options that might be of interest and using them to illustrate the ways in which these different programs can offer different features. I did want everyone to be able to play along with me on this demonstration, so that's why I chose the free option. And we're going to be using this for the rest of the presentation. Now, Bitwarden can be used exclusively on mobile or computers, but in this example, I installed it on both my mobile device and the computer that I was using. However, all the screenshots provided are from the desktop use only due to security settings. Those security settings are something that you can turn off on your mobile device if you want to, but I chose to keep that on. What I'm referring to, when we look at settings later on, we'll see some things related to this. There is a lot of course, security with your password management programs. And one of the options that you can have is you can have on the mobile device, it's set to prevent screenshots from being taken so that nobody can press a button on your phone to take a screenshot of your passwords when you have this available. So with that option in place, I was of course unable to take screenshots on my phone to include in this demonstration. That being said, not much was lost there. Everything that I'm going to be talking about can be done through the browser as well, and we're going to be taking a close look at that. Now, as we see on the screen here, I'm beginning this process by downloading the extension into my browser. For this demonstration, I used Firefox, but you could use Chrome, Microsoft Edge, whichever browser you prefer. As I mentioned earlier, I installed this on both my phone and on the browser. So to install it on the phone, I downloaded the app. And actually, I chose to create the account through the app, but you can create an account through the browser as well. If you have not worked with add-ons or extensions before, each browser has their own feature with it, but you can see the red arrows that I added to this screenshot. For Firefox, on the right-hand side, that little puzzle piece that you see there is where you go to manage your extensions. This, incidentally, is something I would recommend checking out periodically just to see what extensions you have on your browser. Very often, people that are using their browser and are not too familiar with it might have more extensions than they're aware of, and that can create unnecessary pop-ups, slowdowns, or crashes if you have things running that you don't want there. So you can check out your extensions and see if there's anything that you want to get rid of as well. If you look at the screenshot, I don't have this highlighted, but on the left-hand side, you can see where it says extensions, themes, and plugins. And the extensions is the first one that you would check there, but you can check out any themes or plugins you might have added as well. And then in the search section there, I searched for Bitwarden. And as I go to the next page, you can see the result that came up, the Bitwarden Free Password Manager. I chose to add this to Firefox. You see the button right there in the middle. If you're looking this over, you see you have the option to rate your experience with it. You can see some example screenshots, and you can see all of the reviews that people have given. As you can see, this is fairly well reviewed with 4.8 out of 5 stars with about 600,000 users. You do always want to see something with a large number of users, with a large number of reviews. You don't just have a couple for your sample size. Once you have added this on, you will see this login screen. Now again, I created my account through the app first. I started with the mobile device and then came to the browser. You can go in whichever direction you want, or as I mentioned earlier, you can only use it as an app or you can only use it through the browser. Entirely up to you. If you have already created an account, and you can see I highlighted with the giant red arrow there on the left, with the login option that becomes available once you have installed this into your browser. If you've already created the account, you would type in your email address, and then you would type in the password that you created to associate with that account. If you have not, down below that where it says new around here, you would choose create account, and it would ask you to create an account. All Bitwarden asks you for is an email address and a password. It does not require any payment information or anything more extensive than that. So it's a relatively simple account creation process. Now, once you have created the account, it will immediately pop open some options on the left-hand side. Again, if you have not worked with extensions much or you have not worked with popping things up on the side of your browser, that's okay. Everything that we're seeing here and more can be accessed by going to the website that we're going to go to in just a moment for the actual Bitwarden management. So this is just an initial option check that you have going through this. But a few that I want to point out, I've created that large bracket on the left to highlight this, and there are a couple that I wanted to make note of while we're here. These options, again, can also be changed through the app. So you can change these things either on the browser or the app, and either way it will affect both of them because this information is stored in the cloud, not locally on your device. So if on my app I choose to unlock with biometrics, meaning that I'm allowed to sign into it using my fingerprint or my Face ID, then that will be the case as well on the browser. Of course, you might not have a fingerprint reader for your desktop or laptop computer, in which case that would not be useful at all, but it doesn't do any harm for that to be checked there too. You can also see some other key ones here. Two-step login, we'll look at that a little bit later on as well. Unlock with PIN, so if you wanted to have the PIN that you have associated with your phone also work for unlocking this, you can do that too. I would recommend against having too many ways to unlock it. You're just creating added security issues with that. I'm comfortable with biometrics and using those as an unlock method on my phone, but I didn't add the PIN as well because then if somebody accessed the PIN number on my phone, they wouldn't be able to get to this without my consent. A couple of other things worth noting here. On browser restart is what you see for the Vault timeout. That is how long does it stay logged in, and do you need to sign back into this? You can change this to a certain number of minutes, or you can change it to every time the browser is opened up, then you need to sign in again to access your passwords. Other things here, excluded domains is worth noting. If you had any domains that you did not want it to retain passwords for, say perhaps a bank account or investment account that you wanted to keep extremely private, you didn't want to have any online information about that, you could put in that domain and then it would not retain it for this. It will also ask you before retaining anything in particular, so you don't have to do that. You can simply say no, but if you wanted to be extra careful, you could choose to exclude those domains. Now, once you have created the account and you've entered in your basic settings, we can go to the actual use of this. Right now, we're looking at our Vault items. When you have created a new account, your Vault will be blank. This is a relatively new account, so I only have a couple things in here, and I just put some generic ones in that we could use for demonstration. But when you want to add the items, you have two ways to go about it. Each item is a different type of thing that you want to retain. So this can be a login, as are both of the examples that I have here. This can be a credit card number and information. So if you wanted to have it retain your credit card number, expiration date, and 3-digit passcode, then it would be able to retain those. These can be identity bits of information. So sometimes you are required to scan in, say, a driver's license or passport information, or even something like, say, a vaccination card. You can retain those here as well. And then finally, we have the option of retaining secure notes. So if you wanted to type in some record information or just anything that you wanted to make note of, say you have procedures at work or security questions that are asked and you wanted to make sure you remembered the answers that you created for those, you just simply want to type them in somewhere, you can add those here as well and have them behind the layer of security that your password manager provides rather than just simply sitting on your phone or on your computer. Now, adding any of these things can be done two different ways. One, you can, as I have highlighted with the red arrow here, simply choose to add the item. When you do that, it will ask you to type in the address that this is associated with, the username, the password, and any other security information that goes along with it. That is absolutely something that you can do. It is not necessarily the easiest way to go about this. However, if you were starting from scratch and you decided you wanted to populate your password manager with as much stuff as you could quickly, and then get rid of whatever current system you're using for retaining passwords, that might be a way to go about it. The easier way to handle this is to let this come in somewhat organically. Just as you log into websites, it will ask you, do you want to retain this password? So when you are signing into a website, a pop-up will appear near the top of the browser, and it will ask if you want to store this in your Vault, and it will ask you another detail, which folder do you want to put this in? Now, I currently in this setup have no folders in my account. I have changed this since, but the folders can be added if you wanted to organize all the different items. So maybe you have credit cards for work and credit cards for personal use. Maybe you have different health passwords and logins for one user of the computer or another. You can separate those into different folders, and that way you have an easier time sifting through all the items that you will have. One thing worth noting, even if you create folders and you drop these items into it, you will still see them listed here in the Vault items. For those of you who have used folders to organize things, in your email addresses and you're used to them being out of the inbox once you drop them into a folder, it's a little different here. You still see all the items listed in Vault Items, but then when you go into the specific folder, you see them listed there. One other thing that I want to point out while we are here, I have a red arrow pointing to the SD in the upper right-hand corner there. That is just a set of initials that I have associated with my account with this. If you were to click on that, that is another way to take you to the settings that are available with this. We talked a little bit about the settings that we used already, the excluded domains, the unlocking things with biometrics. There are a number of other settings available. We're not going to go into that in too much detail here. One that I want to mention is that is where you would go if you wanted to import data to your Vault from other password management solutions, and if you wanted to export it from this to use in another solution, you would have that option as well. So if you try out something and you decide you're not crazy about it, but you put a lot of work into putting this information into it, you can export all of that, and then any of the ones that we've talked about, really anything that you're going to see on a popular top 10 list of password managers, will be able to import the data from each other and pass it back and forth. So if you start with a new product, say you go from this over to 1Password, you would then be able to export the data from Bitwarden and import it into 1Password. Now, I mentioned before other tools that you would have associated with this, and we're taking a look at a couple of them here. First off, the password generator. If you are creating passwords for your accounts, and as I mentioned earlier, one of the pluses of the password manager is that it allows you to have more complex passwords, so you don't need to keep using the same thing over and over again. If you're wondering why do I keep mentioning this, why do you not want to use the same password over and over again? I talked earlier about how information can be compromised and it can be passed around online in places where people traffic in this sort of thing. The main concern that you have with a password is not that it's simple because somebody might guess it, it's that it's reused. And that means that if somebody were to say, get your password for one online account, maybe you have an account with LinkedIn and they were broken into a few years ago and all the passwords and usernames were stolen, somebody could take that same password and try it with your email address over at eBay or over at Gmail or AOL or Yahoo or any other password site online. And maybe if you've used the same password, they get lucky and they're able to sign into your other accounts. And so a violation of one site can become a violation of a number of sites for you. So that's why you want to use different passwords on different sites. However, that's easier said than done. It can be very cumbersome to have a different password for all of the different accounts that we have these days. And so the password managers are a nice solution for that. And if you've decided, all right, I'm going to start creating different passwords for everything that I do, great, but it can be a bit of energy required to come up with a new password on every site that is not a terribly obvious thing using the site's name or its purpose. So the generator is a nice solution for that. You can come here and you can say, what do you want to generate, a password or a username? And how long does the password need to be? How many numbers need to be in it? How many special characters need to be in it? Do you want to have capital letters, lowercase letters, numbers, special characters? Do you want to avoid confusing characters? That's things like, say, a capital I that also looks like a lowercase l. And then you can generate a password. And you see it has one generated already here. And if this were not a screenshot, if this were actual use, I could click regenerate password and create a new one. I can then copy it and paste it into the password section that I am using for creating a new account. And so anytime you need to create a password, you can come over to your tool here and create that right away. Once you have done that, and you have created the account, it would ask you if you want to retain it, and then you don't have to worry about memorizing this long bit of gibberish here because it is retained with your password manager. So that's the plus of using the generator. It can be very helpful. Next to that, I have the little red arrow pointing to the send feature. I just wanted to mention this because this is an extra feature that is provided with the Bitwarden. What send allows you to do is to securely send information, whether it's text or a file, to somebody else. In the send feature, you type in whatever you want, and then you check options. Do you want it to be anonymous, so it would not have your email address associated with it, so they would not be able to pull up who was sending this to them? Or do you want it to require a password? So perhaps you send things to people, and then at a certain time you want them to be able to open it up. Maybe you have time-sensitive information that the file becomes available when the sale becomes available or when your company starts offering a new product, you could send the information in advance, and then you could send out the password to everybody when it was available. You can in fact post the link to this information, say on Facebook or on a website, but then only provide the password to people who had requested it or who had contacted you for it. So that way you can make information available but still put in restrictions for it. This is, as I said, not strictly speaking part of the password management suite of tools, but it is something that is offered by this product, and so if you're using it anyway, I thought you might want to be aware of it. With that, I want to thank you for taking a look at this. As we saw through the demonstration, the actual use of the product is relatively straightforward. Once you have populated your vault with the items that are in it, it will start autofilling those if you want it to in the settings, or it will at least have them available for you anytime you want to check it. It will ask you every time you sign into a new web page if you want to retain that information. Then you are ready to go, and it is stored on your browser and anything else that you have associated with the account. One thing that's worth noting about using this with cell phones is that many apps store the passwords automatically, but sometimes things direct you to the website, and so you would have the browser open up on your phone. If you're anything like me, you don't use the browser on the phone nearly as much as you use the browser on a computer because the apps take care of a lot of that for you. So very often your browser on the phone does not have those passwords retained. So it can be nice to have the password manager available when you are suddenly using the browser app on your phone and you have not used that for a while. I thank you very much for your interest in this topic. If you have any further questions about it, please let me know. This was a new topic that was requested by a patron here. I am always interested in your suggestions and what you would like to see us offer. So if you want to see more on this topic or anything else, comment below the video or contact me here at the Bloomingdale Public Library. Thank you again for your time.